Are you looking for a simple technique that you can use for any occasion in your card making? I've got one for you. Let's get crafting. Today we're going to do a little ink blending along with some heat embossing, and I'm going to use Distress Oxides in Kitsch Flamingo, Picked Raspberry, and Abandoned Coral, along with clear embossing powder. Now you're going to need some really heavyweight cardstock. I'm using Accent Opaque 100-pound card for my layer here. I usually use these for my bases, but because we're going to be adding a lot of ink and doing a lot of heat embossing, we want to use a thicker, heavier cardstock. You also need some stamps, multiples of any type of stamp. Here I'm using snowflakes, but you could use any type of floral or I don't know, Christmas ornaments, birthday hats, whatever kind of stamp you have multiple of in lots of different sizes. Certainly mix and match between stamp styles. Doesn't all have to come from one particular stamp set. I highly recommend using some type of stamp positioner. The one that I'm using is from Stampin' Up! And is no longer available. But a Misty will work, a Tim Holtz platform, whatever you have, it'll work. I just don't necessarily recommend an acrylic block just in case you have to go back over it. You're also going to need some sticky embossing ink, and I'm going to be using Versamark today. I am just positioning my snowflakes over my cardstock because I want to get as many snowflakes on the background as I can. So I've attached those now to the lid of my stamp positioner, and I'm going to go ahead and add some sticky embossing ink. And I have to tell you, if you've been around with me for a while, you know that the part I always forget is using the anti-static powder bag. But today, I remembered every single time. I'm so proud of myself. Now you notice that I am using 3 different colors of Distress Oxide ink. Now, Distress Oxide does happen to be the best choice of ink for this particular technique because it's a hybrid ink. You could use Distress, but you run the risk of it becoming muddy. With the Distress Oxides, they are creamy and opaque, so you're not going to get a muddy look if you have colors that go together. I've chosen a light, a medium, and a darker in the pink color family. Now, of course, if you don't care for pinks, try it in a different color series. Try blues, greens, purples, yellows. The sky's the limit here. I'm going to go ahead and add my clear superfine embossing powder to my cardstock, making sure I get excellent coverage, and then I'm going to go ahead and tap that off and heat emboss. Now, this first go around specifically, it's going to be very hard for me to show it to you because it's clear on white. So it's just going to get shiny on my end, and I'll know it's properly baked, but for you, it's not going to show up so well just yet. The magic is coming. Now, in an effort to keep my embossing powder off the floor and off of my glass mat, I went ahead and poured it back in and attached the lid. I am preheating my Wow Embossing heat tool because a well heated up embossing tool will, 1, melt your powder much faster, and 2, by melting the powder faster, you end up with less warpage of your cardstock. And that thicker, heavier weight cardstock that I'm using today also lends itself to less warping. Hey y'all, I'm Wendy from Village Card and Craft, and I want to thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me. We have got a lot of new subscribers, and I'm thoroughly excited about that. So thank you for hitting that subscribe button. And if you're new to the group, please consider giving me a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button so you can be notified when I release new content. I am thrilled about this project, and I hope you are as well, and I would love to see what you create with it. Please consider joining us over on Facebook at Village Card and Craft so that you can share your creations with the rest of our group. Once your powder is properly melted, go ahead and just give it a second to cool off. You don't want to blend any of that into the cardstock, so you want to maintain that crisp image that you just embossed. I am starting off with the Kitsch Flamingo color, which is the lightest in my particular series of 3 colors. And I'm going to ink blend that in using a blending brush. What if you don't have blending brushes? Well, you could certainly use foam to ink blend, whatever you normally do, or you can take a much quicker approach, albeit you will use a lot more ink, by ink swiping. If you have a properly juicy ink pad, go ahead and ink swipe over the whole thing. It'll get done in a hot hurry that way. But I really enjoy ink blending, so that's what I've opted to do today. The other thing about this particular technique, especially in this stage, is that it doesn't have to be perfect. I happen to like my colors pretty dark, but you could use spun sugar, which would give you a much lighter base coat. But really the sky's the limit here. I just want to get the same color over the entire background. And there is a method to the madness here, but you do whatever makes you happy. As we finish this up, you'll see that I have used an acrylic block once I turned my cardstock, because I did add quite a bit of ink. I don't want my fingerprints in it, because that will not make a beautiful Christmas card. Now I'm turning on my heat gun to option 1 this time, to dry, and I'm taking a piece of paper towel and I am rubbing any residual ink off of the embossing powder of the snowflakes. That way it's going to show me what's under the snowflake. In this case, it's white cardstock, so that's why the snowflakes will appear white. The embossing powder resists the ink. And now, because I am super impatient, I'm going to go ahead and dry my cardstock. Your ink needs to be completely dry before moving to the next section. So going back to other types of ink, namely distress inks, which are dye ink, or any dye ink like Simon Hurley's inks or Catherine Pooler's, it's not really going to work very well for this particular technique because generally they're translucent, meaning you can see through them, and you'll be able to combine 2 colors to create a third color and potentially could create mud. The distress oxides layer on top of one another, and that's the beauty of this particular technique. Now with my cardstock dry, I'm going to go ahead and put it back into my stamping platform, and using the same stamps, I'm going to create my second layer. Now it's okay if you want to overlap. I didn't particularly want to do that, but you could, and you're still going to get a stunning result. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up and lift off those stamps. Ink up my stamps with Versamark, and look at me go. Remembering number 2, really make sure you do a thorough job of that anti-static powder bag. It really comes in handy now. You notice up by the magnet I didn't have any stamps, so I'm going to maneuver these around, being really cautious about where I put the magnet, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that area in as well. And once again, go ahead and add your clear embossing powder. And for those of you who are fairly new to stamping, you might not really understand what's happening here. But during this heat embossing process, you're trapping what's underneath. So the first snowflakes that we did, we trapped the white underneath, even though we inked over it. It was the white that you could see. This time, there's Kitsch Flamingo on the cardstock. So by putting the clear snowflakes over top of that, I'm going to have Kitsch Flamingo snowflakes. And that's where this multi-layer embossed resist technique really shines, because each time you add a different layer, you add a different color. This time for my second layer, I'm going to be using Picked Raspberry Distress Oxide. Now this is slightly darker than the Kitsch Flamingo, and I'm just using a piece of paper towel here, once again to keep my fingerprints out of it, and you can see that it's going on just darker than the Kitsch Flamingo first layer. We're going to do the exact same process that we did for the first layer. I'm going to ink up the entire second layer, and I'm going to use a heat tool because of my impatience, and I'm going to dry it. And then I'm going to get out a paper towel and wipe off the snowflakes, because remember, the embossing powder, once it's heat set, will resist the ink that we put over top of it. And that's where you'll get your white snowflakes back. And now you're also going to have a pale pink Kitsch Flamingo snowflake to add to that layer. With each layer of ink, I need to wipe off the snowflakes with a little firmer hand than I did before. The white snowflakes turned white fairly easily, but getting the ink off of the white now, because it's had 2 layers of ink on top, and now the lighter pink, just requires a little heavier hand, and that's where that heavier cardstock really lends itself. Now, I'm really sorry about the light here, because we're actually going through a solar eclipse right now, and my front room, my craft room, happens to have very dappled light. It's lovely, but it's not the greatest because we can't really see. Okay, we're ready for our third and final layer, and I'm adding that anti-static powder bag really heavily, and we're going to use those stamps once again. Now, I've noticed that by placing my cardstock the same direction in my stamp platform, I had a lot of missing space. So I just turned the cardstock, no harm there, and I'm going to go ahead and add. Now this time I did add some really tiny little snowflakes that I hadn't added previously. I kind of wanted them to be on the top so it would add a little bit of a filler. I'm going to speed this up because pretty much it's all the same from here on out. Now this particular project really lends itself to using whatever you already have in your stash. So I highly suggest that you dig through what you have before you go purchasing something new. However, if you do want to see what it is that I'm using, I'll link everything below in the description box, as well as the specifics for this particular project, like I always do. I think this would make a great birthday card using all different styles of the word happy birthday as your sentiment. Someone wants to try it and show it to me on Facebook, I'd love to see it. Now my third ink layer is going to be Abandoned Coral, which is still kind of in the pink family, but it is a little bit more red to me, so I thought that would make a beautiful Christmas card with that on top. It's unusual, but it's still stunning. Okay, let's heat dry this, and then we can finally start to see the reveal. I'm so excited. Okay, let's finish this card up. Now I am going to mat this on some black cardstock, and I typically have black mats already made up along with white layers, and they're all 5.5 by 4.25. So I'm just cutting this down by 1/8. I want a super thin white border, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing to the inked panel. I'm going to cut that down just a little tiny bit, so I have about 1/8 of an inch all the way around with the black as well. Now I'm going to be using Bearly Arts Precision Craft Glue, which if y'all know me, you know that this is my absolute fave. You could certainly pop this up on some foam tape, but I'm just going to pop up the sentiment. So I'm going to keep everything relatively flat on this card. That it just makes it easier and less expensive to put in our mail. So I keep this little notebook of baseball trading card filler pages, and anytime I make extra sentiments or cut out printables, I just kind of throw them in here. That way I can kind of just look through the binder and decide what it is I want. all of these sentiments came from a recent summit that I attended, and they were freebies. So I highly suggest, if you see a summit that interests you, even if you just do the free ticket, because that's all I do, go ahead and sign up. You can watch all of the videos that you're interested in, and you get a lot of freebies with those. So that's where most of this, including the printables that you saw there, they're all just things that other creators have given for free by subscribing to their email newsletter. Now I am going to offset this to the right on my card, and I'm going to make it a top folding landscape card. A little different from what I usually do, but again, that's the only thing that I'm popping up is the season's greetings, and I've added a couple of pink sequins, and you have to admit, it's beautiful. And I used VERSAFINE CLAIR Charming Pink ink and a sentiment on the inside to finish off this card. And if you'd like to check out additional Christmas cards or embossing techniques, please check out my playlist. And I'll see you real soon.